Hey, all my friends out there, Sam Haymart with Test Driven TV. We have been testing a lot of sports sedans this spring, and well, this week we have the 2024 Genesis G70, and this is the Sport Prestige, which means it's got the fire-breathing 3.3 liter twin turbocharged V6 under the hood. Yeah, so we're gonna show it to you inside and out. We're gonna take it for a drive, and then I'm gonna tell you what I really think. All right, my friends, so let's talk about the car we've got here today, 2024 Genesis G70 Sport Prestige, and that basically means this is the top of the line, about the most you can spend on this. As tested, we're at $57,100. Now, the base price on this model is $49,950. You can spend quite a bit less if you go down with a 2.5 liter four-cylinder engine, but if you get the V6, this is kind of where you're going to be. And this has one big option, and that is the Bond Silver paint you're looking at, a nice matte finish if you're into that. It's an expensive option, $1,500. Almost all of the other colors are optional as well. They're about $650 as the option. If you want white or just plain silver, you don't have to spend any money. But if you want this, you're going to pay. Now, looking at the styling, this did have a significant refresh in 2022, which gave it a new grille and the dual thin line headlights that we've come to see on the rest of the Genesis lineup. LED headlights, they work pretty good, and because of the trim grade that we've got here, this has a nice black chrome finish on that grille. I think it looks pretty nice, especially against this Bond Silver. Looking at the wheels, 19-inch alloys, and they have a nice set of Brembo brakes back behind them too, don't they? I mean, red calipers never look bad, especially when you have a monotone appearance on the rest of the car. All of the rest of the trims on this car are either gloss black or the black chrome, which really, again, sets off nicely with this color. Up on the roof, a panoramic sunroof. Now, this is not a full glass roof all the way back, but it is much larger than a standard sunroof, and it does open. Coming back to the rear three-quarter view, you can really see that this has a definitive Coke bottle shape to its overall proportions and sculpting. The rear quarters just really have a lot of muscular bulge to them, and those tires and wheels really fill up the space. To me, this is where this facelift that occurred in 2022 looks a little bit more forced than, say, it does up front, with taillights that clearly fit in the same openings as the old ones, but they have the dual stripe setup with a body color stripe across them. It still looks handsome, but looks a little bit like they just sort of forced the facelift upon this car to make sure it looked just like the rest of the lineup. A nice little ducktail spoiler molded into the rear deck lid, and down in the lower fascia, some nice detailing down there with a lower splitter design and tailpipe cutouts and trims, I should say, that well, they're not entirely 100% real, but at least air blows through there. You can see exhaust pipes in there, unlike some of the other brands that completely fake us out, like, oh, I don't know, Mercedes-Benz. The interior of the Genesis G70 is, well, I'll just say it, a pretty nice place to be. The first thing that really sunk in sitting behind the wheel is that the quality materials here is quite exquisite. There are soft stitch trims on the dash, on the door panels, and with the extra Napa leather trim that we have in here, there's this beautiful quilted trim on the door panels, genuine aluminum, and the quality of the switchgear is really top of class. And it usually is in the Genesis cars. It's one of the things they've become known for, is excellent craftsmanship on the interiors and a forward-looking design. Now, this design has been out for a while, so it's not the most future-forward design we've seen in the most recent Genesis vehicles, but it's well laid out, it's well done. We are in a top-of-the-line trim here, so this does have Napa leather seats, as I mentioned. They're both heated and ventilated up front, and they're power operated both for the driver and the passenger. Driver also has memory settings over here. I find them quite comfortable. They have active side bolsters, which really tie into not only the drive modes, but you can set them to however tight you want the seat to hold you, which as a driver, I like that. They're just quite comfortable. They're well done chairs. The steering wheel, leather covered. I've got genuine aluminum paddle shifters, and the switchgear on the steering wheel is just very well done. Ahead of me, not the full digital instrument cluster we see in the newest designs. Instead, it has a partial digital instrument cluster and an analog gauge, and part of that digital set is designed such that it actually looks like the analog. So it has a symmetrical look, but 2/3 of it is digital. It is customizable. You can put all sorts of information. This also has a head-up display ahead of me. Over on the center stack, a little bit of a smaller screen than we're used to seeing on a lot of the most modern vehicles, but it's still quite visible and works well. Below that, a set of hard controls for said infotainment system screen. Below that, a touch screen and hard controls for the HVAC. One of the things I like is the cubby for your phone down here in the front. It has a wireless charger on this particular one, all the power ports. I like the fact that I can reach down there and easily access my phone. It's not hidden away in a tight spot or buried out of view. Shifter on this is an electronic toggle, but it is a conventional shifter type setup. And off to the side, cup holders with nice trim around them. That's very nicely done. A lot of little details there. And then just behind the shifter, drive mode selector and parking brake. Center console storage, openable door. It's about the size of a square tissue box, but not entirely as deep, but the width is about the same. Also an additional power port in there for charging. Above my head is, as I mentioned on the outside, a panoramic sunroof, but it's not a full pano roof, and the glass itself does open. The rear seat of the Genesis G70 is pretty much what you'd expect in a compact and mid-size sports sedan of late. Legroom back here isn't exactly the most. It's not a G80 or a G90. These seats are set for my height, which is about 5'8" with my tennis shoes on. I've got about an inch of knee room ahead of me, so I really wouldn't want someone much bigger than me sitting in front of me if I were back here. The seating position is a little bit low, but the good news is these seats are almost bucket-like, and so they really hold you. And so even though I'm kind of sitting down and my knees are perched up a little bit, it's comfortable. It's quite comfortable indeed. And this quilted leather back here, I just absolutely love it. The trimmings back here are just as nice as they are up front. Amenities include, of course, vents on the back of the console, which are blowing on me right now. It's getting quite warm out here in Arizona. Power ports down below. There is a full down armrest here with cup holders in it, just as nicely trimmed as those up front. I just love the details. The trunk is pretty big for a vehicle of this class. These seats fold down in a 40-60 split so that you can put large things in through the trunk if you go to the big box store. Maybe you're going on a big trip or something like that. And so there's a lot of versatility. Underneath that floor, to my surprise, is actually a mini spare, even on the high performance model with the largest tires and wheels. The 12-volt battery is even hidden down underneath. So they've really utilized that space back there for a lot of utility. My big takeaway here is that the quality of this interior is really fitting of the price of this vehicle. In fact, I would say that if this vehicle were $60,000 or $70,000, we're still in the same neighborhood. This is a well-done interior, right up there with Lexus. Not quite as Las Vegas-esque as some of the Mercedes-Benz interiors, but the quality and craftsmanship is here. And I'm somewhat reminded of the Alfa Romeo Giulia I just tested last week that had cheap parts and pieces up here on this instrument panel surround that you could just pluck off, and it was squeaky and chintzy. I am putting my body weight into this. Not only does it not make any sound, it doesn't move, it's solid. It is not coming off of there. It is well made. And the rest of this interior, the materials and just how well it's bolted down, is like very few vehicles in this class. This interior gets 5 out of 5 stars, period. The infotainment system here is a 10.25-inch screen, slightly smaller than in some of the most recent Genesis vehicles, which go up to a larger 12-inch screen, but it is much the same design, content, and system that you can see. It is fully featured. It has navigation. It has some cloud-based services, satellite radio, Bluetooth connectivity, AM, FM, and it also has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Now, it is worth noting that those are not wireless in this model, but it does have them. This has a Lexicon audio system, which has an excellent back end for sound quality. And most important, it does have native navigation. It's not some subscription-based thing like a lot of the other brands have gone to. Using it is pretty straightforward. The graphics are good, visibility is good, And just getting around and navigating to what you want is not only easily done on the touchscreen, but these hard controls down here offer you jump controls to get to certain menu trees without having to navigate around using the touchscreen. Best yet, it has hard controls for volume and tuning. I love that. That's one of my pet peeves. If they don't have this here, it usually starts really eating on me using it unless they've done it well. There are controls over here on the steering wheel additionally, but if you like it the old-fashioned way like I do, it's maybe because I'm old. Well, I'm not that old, but I like to have knobs. It's just easier than so many other ways the car makers are forcing us to do it. There's also an excellent 360-degree view monitor, which is very well done. It has good visibility, even though the screen isn't quite as large as some of the competitors. It makes it easy to see where you're at in the parking space, parallel parking, etc. This is a system that really fires on all cylinders. It gets 5 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, let's go for a drive. So let's first talk about what's under the hood. This has got a 3.3 liter Lambda 2 twin turbocharged V6. And here it's got 368 horsepower. Normally it's 365 plus the 376 torque, but because it's got the adaptive variable exhaust, you get 3 extra horsepower, 368. And all of that goes to just the rear wheels here through an 8-speed automatic transmission. You can option all-wheel drive, but luckily, and I always say luckily because it's less weight and maybe a little quicker, just rear-wheel drive on this one. So that makes me happy. So if you watch my videos, you know the question I always like to ask is, how does it go? So we're going to come to a complete stop, and we're on Sport Plus. Here we go. Woo! Oh my heavens. A little steering correction there, because this gets a little bit of a squirrel to it. And 80. Well, I guess we blew right past the 0 to 60. Slow down, slow down, slow down. I've got a corner coming up. Woo! Boy, and I get a little bit of a boat and squirrel coming out of that corner too. Yeah. So this is a chassis that kind of lets this thing get squirrely. Squirrel, it's got squirrel. I like squirrel. Now this is an engine that really doles out the power quite nicely. The transmission puts it down, and with this exhaust, it's pretty loud, especially on this setting. You can dial that back to quite a bit of a quieter experience, but if you like the sound of the exhaust, it gives you the option to have it. So this is an engine that puts out good power, and it's immediate. This transmission does a good job of doing its job. It's got paddle shifters here, but I usually don't use those. I just don't. And so I'm happy with this power level. It makes me smile. And I like the chassis that gives you a little bit of squirrel TM. Now, what I'm not so impressed with is its noise. It's not quite as smooth and refined as an inline six you're going to find in some of the competitors. And as such, it's a little bit rougher. It's got a little bit more noise going on, even with the nice exhaust sound. Cattle guard. But the rev matching that's going on, the downshifts and everything that it gives you, woo! Yeah, it's nice. And it's got a nice little pop when it shifts, especially on Sport and Sport Plus. So power's great. That's gonna make you happy. And it works. It just works. But the last thing I would talk about would be fuel economy. Not as bad as you think. 18 city, 27 highway, 21 combined. That's not bad considering the power and the weight that we're dealing with here. And in my week with it, about 20 to 21 is what I got. So it's right up there giving you what it promises. So in the final analysis, this is a fun powertrain. It moves this car well. It works well. It's tight. The only downsides are it's just not quite as smooth and refined as you might get from some of the inline sixes some of the competitors are now offering. This powertrain gets 4.5 out of 5 stars. Now we're going to talk about chassis. What does it feel like? How does it handle? So this is a vehicle that is related to the G70 from Genesis. That's a little bit larger. This one, though, has a chassis that does have some slight differences. It is a little bit smaller. Up front is a McPherson strut front suspension. In the rear, a multi-link rear suspension. Now, because of all of the trim grade that we have, this one has the adaptive dampers on it, which is a nice thing. Really is affected nicely by the drive modes. If you set it on comfort, it tends to have a little bit more of a comfort oriented ride. When you dial it up to Sport and Sport Plus, this thing gets nice and stiff and tight. And so even though it does have a little bit of squat that we talked about under power, it's tight. And so on Sport, like right now, it's got a nice sharp turn in, and that was a kettle guard. It's a pretty firm ride. This thing feels well under control. The grip from these nice tires on the 19-inch wheels, pretty good. And the braking power we get with these big brakes, 13.8-inch discs at the front, is pretty commendable. I have not once thought, boy, these brakes need to be stronger. And especially when we were under power back there, it was nice to know that when I laid into those things, they were going to bring me down to a reputable speed going into the corners. And speaking of those corners, as I said, this has got a nice sharp turn in, particularly on Sport mode. The steering effort, a little bit heavier, a little bit lighter on comfort. Now, when it comes to road noise, this is actually pretty quiet. It's not the quietest sedan in its class. I'd probably say that the Lexus IS is a little bit quieter overall. This is a vehicle that on our 70-mile-an-hour freeway test came in at 59.8 decibels, which is just a little bit lower than the average tick, which is around 61 decibels. So it's, you know, it's quiet, it's touch, not very much wind noise, even with this glass roof. But corners, my God, that's my favorite part. These tires and wheels and this chassis really gives a nice, tight turn-in, which for a sedan that feels as solid and heavy as this does, I was surprised that it didn't feel a little bit muddier. And the Mercedes-Benz C-Class, for instance, a little bit muddier. As far as the overall ride character and the feel of this, it's really right up there with the Lexus IS with that solid kind of button-down feel. Here we go again. Whee! Nice. Nice. I like it. Cattle guard. There's a lot of those out here. This is a chassis that I'm very happy with. It's got a little bit of a rough edge on some road irregularities, and it does kind of let you get a little bit of squirrel when you really lay into the power off the line. But overall, it gets 4.5 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, there you have it. We've looked at it inside now. We've taken it for a drive, had some fun, and now let's talk about value and competitiveness. And so what do you compare this car against? Well, we talked about some of those, but this basically falls into that sort of entry-level, mid-size rear-wheel drive sedan segment that includes the BMW 3 Series, Mercedes-Benz C-Class, the Lexus IS, and perhaps the Alfa Romeo Giulia, like we just tested a week or so ago. And you know, where this sort of falls in the personality scale of those, this most resembles, in my opinion, the Lexus IS. It's got that solid, luxurious, well-done interior that's simple and easy to live with. It doesn't really have any quirks, so to speak of, and there's no little quality foibles that make you go, gosh, really? Like the Alfa Romeo we just tested. So this is a vehicle that also offers a lot of equipment and feature content for a fixed price. Unlike the Germans that stack dollars and dollars and dollars and dollars on top of that base price every time you add something. Yes, this paint's a little bit expensive, but you can choose not to get it. And, you know, stepping up to the top where we're at right around $57,000, this is literally the most you can spend on this car just about. And you can get down into the 40s quite a distance. So with the warranty that this has, 5 years, 60,000 miles, bumper to bumper, 10 years, 100,000 miles powertrain. It's got the best warranty in the business for a luxury car. And geez, the thing's built pretty well too. So I put value here at 5 out of 5 stars. When you put that in with everything we've already talked about, we're at 4.8 stars for the total review score. Exceptional. Definitely a good choice out there in the market. If I were choosing between a Lexus IS and this, I would have a tough time because they're both very good options if I were choosing just not to go with one of the Germans for whatever reason. And they're good options too, but you know, be prepared to spend some more money. You know what I'm saying? So there you go, our test drive of the 2024 Genesis G70. If you like what we do, you can see our latest video right there. Better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there. Either way, stay tuned.